जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी जय कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम जय गौरानिताय जय गौरानिताय गौरानिताय जय गौरानिताय जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय परमंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय मिषपाद परमंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्भागवतम की जय। श्री श्री कृष्ण बलराम की जय। श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय। हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। जगत गुरु शील प्रभुपाद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 22, Text number 28. Tam ayantam abhipretya tamayantam abhipretya tamayantam abhipretya ब्रह्मा वर्तात प्रजाः पतिं ब्रह्मा वर्तात प्रजाः पतिं ब्रह्मा वर्तात प्रजाः पतिं गीता संस्तुति वादित्रैः गीत संस्तुति वादित्रैः गीत संस्तुति वादित्रैः प्रत्युदीयुः प्रहर्षिताः प्रत्युदीयुः प्रहर्षिताः प्रत्युदीयुः प्रहर्षिताः तमायान्तमभिप्रेत्य ब्रह्मावर्तात् प्रजापते गीत संस्तुति वादित्रैः प्रत्युदीयुः प्रहर्षिताः तमायान्तमभिप्रेत्य ब्रह्मावर्तात् प्रजापते गीत संस्तुति वादित्रैः प्रत्युदीयुः प्रहर्षिताः Tam, him, Ayantam, who was arriving, Abhipretya, knowing of, Brahmavartat, from Brahmavarta, Prajaha, his subjects, Patim, their Lord, Gita Samstuti Vaditraihi, with songs, praise, and instrumental music. Pratyudiyuhu came forward to greet. Praharshitaha, overjoyed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Overjoyed to know of his arrival, his subjects came forth from Brahmavarta to greet their returning Lord with songs, prayers, and musical instruments. Can you repeat? Overjoyed to know of his arrival, his subjects came forth from Brahmavarta to greet their returning Lord with songs, prayers, and musical instruments. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is the custom of the citizens of a kingdom's capital to receive the king when he returns from a tour. There is a similar description when Krishna returned to Dwaraka after the battle of Kurukshetra. At that time, he was received by all classes of citizens at the gate of the city. Formerly, capital cities were surrounded by walls, and there were different gates for regular entrance. Even in Delhi today, there are old gates, and some other old cities have such gates where citizens would gather to receive the king. Here also, the citizens of Barhishmati, the capital of Brahmavarta, the kingdom of Swayambhuva, came nicely dressed to receive the emperor with decorations and musical instruments. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namavo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. So here we are seeing how the citizens of Barhishmati, the capital of Brahmavarta, they are receiving their king, Swayambhuva Manu, who is returning after handing over his daughter Devahuti to Kardama Muni in marriage. He was away for a few days because along with Shatarupa, his wife, the queen, Swayambhuva Manu had taken Devahuti along with his retinue looking for a suitable husband. And then he had come to Kardama Muni's ashram. There he discussed with Kardama Muni, put his proposal forward. Kardama Muni also accepted. And then they found a suitable time and opportunity, an auspicious date, and the wedding between Kardama Muni and Devahuti was performed. After this was done, Swayambhuva Manu along with Shatarupa returned to Barhishmati, his capital. When the citizens of Barhishmati, they heard that Swayambhuva Manu has returned. Naturally, all these things must have taken a few days, several days. Approaching Kardama Muni and then putting the proposal, his acceptance, then finding a suitable muhurta, conducting the wedding, all this would have taken some days. Naturally, after a period of absence, when Swayambhuva Manu was returning to the kingdom, the citizens, they all very happily came to the entrance of the city to receive the king. Nowadays also, whenever the Prime Minister or the President of the country goes abroad for a few days and then comes back, when he comes at the airport, there will be some ministers and bureaucrats to receive the Prime Minister or the President. This is natural, and they'll bring some bouquets and they will very warmly greet the leader back to the country, etc. Of course, nowadays, because of security reasons and multiple other reasons, the general public is not allowed to go to the airport to receive the leader. But in the olden times, it is very significant here that when the citizens heard that the king is coming, all classes of citizens came to the entrance of the city to receive the king. Here it is mentioned how they received the king, Swayambhuva Manu. Gita Samstuti Vaditraihi, with songs, prayers and musical instruments. Samstuti means prayer or glorification. Naturally, the Brahmanas are the people who are learned in the Vedas, and whenever the king has returned, they are the ones who chant many prayers and glorifications from the Vedic scriptures. So the Brahmanas were there, Gita Vaditrahi, with songs and instruments. That means many other artists of the city, they had also come. Therefore, we can understand that all the learned intellectuals of the city, the Brahmanas, the artists, and the common masses of people, they had all gathered to receive the king. And in those days, the cities, the entrances to the cities would be marked with big gates or arches, from which one could understand that, okay, now we have reached the city. And especially if we go to old cities, if you go to Jaisalmer, if you go to Karauli, when you are entering, the entrance is a very big gate, very big door. Of course, those doors have not been used for centuries, so they all must have got stuck in the hinges. But otherwise, in the olden days, these were the entrances to the cities. They would serve multiple purposes, not only as the places for welcoming guests or the returning leaders, returning kings, but also during wars and such other instances, during battles, the gates would be closed to prevent the enemy soldiers from entering the cities. Now, the citizens, they all gathered to receive the king, because from this we can understand that the citizens loved their king so much, and the king also loved the citizens like his own children. That is why when they heard that the king is coming, they all came very joyously to the entrance of the city, and they started singing and chanting verses in glorification. This was a very conducive, cooperative relationship between the kings and the citizens. In the modern day world, we don't see this kind of bonhomie between the citizens and the kings. Nowadays, it has become all too common. The President of the United States go to address some gathering, somebody from that gathering will take a shoe and throw it at him. Some chief minister of Delhi will go somewhere, one guy will throw one bottle of ink at him. And some other president or prime minister goes somewhere, they'll show black flags. All these things have become common. And so nowadays, wherever the president or prime minister is going, the security has to first check who is the person coming, whether he is from the opposition party. We should allow, no black colored cloths are allowed inside the venue. All these kind of restrictions have started coming in place. Olden days, no such fear was there, because the king used to treat all the subjects equally, and he used to treat them exactly like his children. And why? Because the king was also acting on behalf of the Supreme Lord. The king is called Naradeva, means he is a representative of the Supreme Lord. And his purpose in ruling over was in total agreement with the purpose of the Supreme Lord. And so therefore, there was no question of any exploitation. He would only be always thinking of the welfare of the citizens. In Kali Yuga, of course, what has happened is, Dasyu Prayeshu Rajasu. It is said in the Srimad-Bhagavatam that in Kali Yuga, all the rulers, all the Dasyu means all the dacoits, all the looters, they will become the rulers. The moment you speak of a looter, what is his thought process? His thought process is, how can I exploit everyone and maximize my wealth? This is how a robber or a thief thinks. Now, if you put him in the position of the king, what will he do? He will only think, I don't know how long I'm going to be there, but as long as I'm there, let me accumulate as much as I can. Let me loot as much as I can. This is the thinking of the people. So in Kali Yuga, the kings or the rulers, they are not thinking of the welfare of the citizens, but they are thinking only of their own welfare. And because of this, the citizens also do not love the rulers. The rulers also don't love the citizens. Citizens also don't love the rulers. So if the ruler is coming back after a long period, nobody is going to receive him with Gita Samstuti Vaditraihi. Nobody is going to go and receive him. So his own ministers and some bureaucrats go and receive. This is how it is. In the olden ages, because the kings used to be representatives of the Supreme Lord, and they would always take care of the welfare of the citizens. How would they take care of the welfare of the citizens? By ensuring that everyone is given an equal opportunity to serve Lord Vishnu and to become his devotee. And so therefore, all the citizens, they would understand the loving nature of the king. But with time, what has happened is, all the royal class of people, they have lost this sense of being the representatives of the Supreme Lord. And all the kings, they started thinking that my royal position is for my aggrandizement, my self-aggrandizement. I'll go and attack the nearby kingdom, increase my area of influence, let me make a bigger army, I should become more powerful. When the king started thinking like this in Kali Yuga, that was the downfall of monarchy. And that is how the monarchical system has practically become abolished. It cannot work in Kali Yuga because everyone is in the exploitative mode. It has been replaced with the more or less the democratic system. In some places still dictatorship exists, wherever communism and that kind of socialism and these kind of things exist. But otherwise, by and large, there is democracy in most of the places. Democracy, the concept of democracy is what? Concept of democracy is that a majority of the people choose who their leader is going to be. But actually, like all man-made systems, this is also just utopia. There is no meaning to this democracy system. Because if you look at India itself, everybody knows that if you get about 30% of the votes, 30 to 35% of the votes, you can capture power. So 30 to 35% is not majority, no. And that too, 30 to 35% of the votes means voting itself is only about 60 to 65%. That means 30 to 35% of 65%, if you take, hardly about 20% of the population is selecting who is going to be the leader of the country. So where is majority? Actually, there is no majority. In that sense, if you see, democracy is not working anywhere. And these people, because they are elected for a short period of time, 5 years, 4 years, whatever, they know they have got very little time in their hand. Nobody is thinking of any doing real good for the citizens. Their only thinking is that whatever the previous government did, let me dismantle everything and then let me bring in new things by which I can earn some money before I go out of power. In Uttar Pradesh, there are the elections are hotly contested, even at the panchayat level. There are elections at the panchayat level also. That means every village, they have panchayat elections and they have to elect the Gram Pradhan, who is going to be the head of the panchayat in the village. Very hotly contested. And sometimes people even murder the opponents so that they can come to power. Now, one media person went and interviewed one guy and asked him that what is your motivation in standing for this Gram Panchayat elections? He said, you see, it is very standard. Anybody who becomes a Gram Panchayat head, he becomes the Pradhan, he becomes the Gram Pradhan, he will get about 5-6 years of time. During that, the government will allot a lot of money for welfare activities in the village. And no matter how poor the guy is, once he has become a Pradhan, by the time he finishes his term, he would have built a Pakka RCC house for himself and he would have bought one Scorpio vehicle. So I also want to do the same thing. Aspiration to improve his standard of life. This is the motivation for the man to stand in the election. Now, this is not true only of Gram Pradhan. This is true even of MLAs, MPs, all of them. Their only thinking is, you look at all the election, during the election time, the people will they have to file their assets, how much money and assets they have in their possession. That's one of the declarations that all the candidates who are standing in the election they have to give. All those people who stand in the election and win the election, after that you will see their wealth multiplies very nicely. And especially if they are part of the ruling party, then their wealth in 5 years will become 3 times, 4 times it will increase. And their assets will increase multifold, their land holdings, their profitability of their companies, everything will go up. So it is very clear, people's intention in becoming leaders in today's society is simply to be able to earn money. If there is a law that none of the politicians can hold any wealth and they cannot do any business, if that kind of law is brought in, then you will see practically 99% of the politicians will all resign and they'll say we are not interested in politics anymore. That's the reality. So the Bhagavatam is very, that way its prediction is coming true very, in a very correct way. Because the Bhagavatam says, Dasya Prayeshu Rajasu. At the cost of the citizens, the rulers are enjoying a luxurious life. This is the reality. And so naturally, the citizens also, they don't love their rulers. They elect them because they have got no other option. They have to go and put the votes. Every 5 years, they go and put the vote. The guy is elected. After 5 years, the people reject him. They call it anti-incumbency. What is this anti-incumbency? People have seen, okay, this fellow we gave a vote, he didn't do anything for us. Let us try somebody else. That guy also will not do anything, then they'll keep. So like this, they keep hopping around. And finally, the number of candidates, when it gets over, they'll come back to again the first guy. Let us give him one more try. So once again, that guy will become the CM for 5 years. After that, again, like this, the cycle goes on. So this is a very sad state of affairs, but this is the reality which is described in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. We can see how the Bhagavatam is such a, the Vedic scriptures are free from all faults. They are able to predict how the future will go. In fact, it is stated in the Bhagavatam that karapiditaha janaha, that in Kali Yuga, as the time goes by, people will be taxed so heavily that the common mass of people will all run away from the cities and towns and they will go to the forest. That day will come soon. So, the Bhagavatam is giving the example of the ideal king and the ideal citizens. The citizens are also, their whole goal in life is not simply economic development and sense gratification. They are also interested in spiritual emancipation. And when they see that the king is taking care of their spiritual needs, then the citizens are also satisfied. Otherwise, a society which is not based upon spiritual emancipation, but on other factors such as economic development, the society can never be peaceful. Nowadays, every year, all over the world, they do a global ranking of which country is the they have a global ranking of happiness index. So which country scores how many marks on that happiness index is recorded, and then they arrive at which is the happiest nation, which is the nation where the people are happiest. I think some country like Finland or something has been consecutively scoring the number one position in the world over the last, I think, 5-10 years, something like that. So if you look at how they measure this happiness index, they will have a list of questions that they ask the citizens. How much money you have? Do you have access to good medical care? Do you have a television at home? Do you have a fridge at home? You know, all these kind of things. Practically, the happiness of the people is measured in terms of their economic position and how many goods for sense gratification they have at their home. That determines whether the person is happy or not. And you will see, even in the happiest country in the world, people are committing suicide. If people are happiest in that country, why should they commit suicide? So, people don't have a proper understanding of what constitutes happiness. Even that much sense is not there in Kali Yuga. People think simply if I facility for sense gratification, that is happiness. That's what people are wrongly thinking. But in the olden ages, people very clearly understood that happiness means one has to become free from the influence of the three modes of material nature, and one should learn how to tolerate the miseries of material nature. And by learning to tolerate and having a proper, clear goal in life, what is the purpose of my life? My purpose of my life is to go back to Godhead. There is a life after this death. This human form of life is temporary. This kind of understanding, because it was present in the Vedic system in the society, every person in the society would understand that life is very temporary, and the sense gratification is not the one which gives real happiness. Real happiness means satisfying Vishnu. Because this understanding was there, everybody had a common understanding, and because of that, there would be no conflicts, because everyone's understanding was single. Everyone's understanding of what constitutes happiness was very clear. In today's world, one man's food is another man's poison. What is happiness for me is distress for you. And what is happiness for you is distress for me. So naturally, the current day society is so designed to create conflicts between individuals, communities, societies, nations. That's the way the world is currently, the whole society is structured. And so naturally, we have a lot of conflicts, we have wars, we have all kinds of economic wars going on, physical wars going on, all kinds of conflicts going on. So therefore, if we want real happiness and real prosperity, like we are seeing in the case of Swayambhuva Manu and the citizens of Barhishmati, the only way is that the rulers have to take up study of the Bhagavad-gita and Srimad-Bhagavatam, and they have to implement the principles which are given in the Bhagavad-gita and Bhagavatam. That is the only way that the whole world can become truly peaceful and prosperous, and the citizens can become truly happy. Otherwise, it is the world is headed towards disaster. So, the Srimad-Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-gita are the beacons of hope in a very dark and bleak world, where practically there is no hope in whichever direction you turn. So the Bhagavatam, that is why in the beginning of the Bhagavatam itself, the sages asked, the sages of Naimisharanya, one of the 6 questions that they asked of Suta Goswami was that now that Lord Krishna, the father of Dharma, has left and gone back to Godhead, now who will protect Dharma? So Suta Goswami replied that Puranarko Adhuno Uditaha, that when Lord Krishna has left this planet, simultaneously the brilliant sun of the Srimad-Bhagavatam has arisen, which will spread light and hope for the people of the world. So we have to spread the message of the Srimad-Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-gita all over the world. More and more people take up the message of the Bhagavad-gita and the Bhagavatam. We can expect the world to become a much better place to live in. People's conflicts will reduce, wars will reduce, and people will be able to live harmoniously. So I'll stop here. If there are any questions or comments, we can discuss. We'll stop here. Grantharaj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.